Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Daniel Lopez-Perez. I'm faculty in the Department of Art, Architecture, and Art History. And today I am thrilled to have Gary Geiler to join us and have a conversation about housing, particularly on affordable, inclusionary, and accessory development. Gary Geiler is the Deputy Director of San Diego Development Services Department, and he has worked as an advisory voice to our research with the students in our department, and we're very, very grateful every time he joins us on campus. Research on ADUs, research on housing. He's been a kind of a guiding voice and an instrumental advisor to our research on housing. This event today is sponsored by the Department of Art, Architecture, and Art History, the Department of Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, but also by the Center for Educational Excellence, the Center for Ethics, Economics, and Public Policy, the Changemaker Hub, and the Urgent Challenges Collective. Gary's would be the third talk on this issue of housing and homelessness, which we had Sanford Aikita join us and Connor Doherty. So we are very, very grateful. In terms of the logistics of the session, after Gary's presentation, we're going to open it up to a Q&A, and I would ask the participants to use the Q&A chat, which should be at the center on the lower bit of your Zoom format. I will keep an eye on the chat version, which is separate, and try to call the questions from both sides. But without any more introduction, thank you so much, Gary, and I'll turn over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me and involving me in your program. You have a great student body there and faculty that is really interested and shown increased interest in addressing some of these housing issues we have, not only in the city, but in the region. My presentation will kind of focus on, coming out of your last presentation, more on the implementation side, not so much theoretical, but how do we actually address these when we go to the built environment? You might have talked about zoning in the past and some of the constraints on supply and demand for housing. This plays a part of that. So I want to go over three areas of interest, and that's the affordable housing component. Under what circumstances are applicants required to or incentivized to do affordable housing? Under which circumstances can they get density bonus, get more units than actually is allowed per the base zone? The inclusionary housing requirements requiring inclusionary affordable housing on site, and accessory housing. Some of the new developments with what are considered ADUs or JADUs, accessory development units or accessory dwelling units, junior accessory dwelling units, what we normally call companion units, and also tiny homes. So I'll go through each three of these, but from the lens of the Development Services Department, who actually is required to implement these changes. That's just some background on our department. We do regulate all land use and building development throughout the city. So whether they be discretionary entitlements, coastal development permit, plan development permit, something at that higher level review that requires environmental review, or the ministerial building permits, those things that are done by right, we process those. We process up to 50,000 approvals through the city each year. We're one of the most busy jurisdictions within the state and the country in terms of permitting. So this includes the single family, the multifamily, commercial. We do a lot of focus on affordable and infill housing. We have a separate group that focuses specifically on that. We do a lot of the industrial and complex major land development projects, some things that are planned 5, 10, 15 years out that are phased, some things that have already been in the process for a while that are just coming online. Obviously 5G right-of-way traffic control, signage, those types of permit types. What we've tried to do during the pandemic is take this opportunity to move to a more digital format that will help with the costs of permitting, which always come up with developers and the building industry. Instead of doing paper plan submittals, we're now to a fully online digital submittal system, which cuts down on obviously paper costs and time costs. Some of those constraints dealing with customers this way has helped speed us through the recovery. We also do inspections for all the development that we do approve. We've gone to a virtual inspection method as well that has helped. Our inspectors go out to every site in the city, and they have to call in the morning to do these. We've gone to a visual survey where they can do pictures or video and get those inspections done. We do a lot of information and appointments and records. A lot of the building research that takes place happens here. You have to find out the original building permit entitlements. Was something permitted? Does it have previous conforming rights to certain density? What if you want to convert that hotel to a homeless facility? Did it have the adequate parking? Those types of things. We do the plan checks, issue the permits. We also take projects to hearings. We have a process level category for each type of permit. We have the ministerial ones that are staff level, but then we also have a hearing officer, which is a staff level decision that's at the public is notified, planning commission, and city council for those higher level process projects. We have some key metrics that we've started to utilize now under the digital environment to track how many building permits do we have. And so we're going to really go forward and use a dashboard to help the public understand where the development's occurring, what type of development, how much is affordable, and coordinate with the Housing Commission and other state agencies to provide this data to the public and to agencies and schools like yourself to kind of filter through the data. So with that, I'd like to start with the affordable housing regulations that we have. We do have affordable housing, and this is required by the state of California. California Government Code section requires a density bonus component within each jurisdiction. The city of San Diego has kind of led over this. We've gone above and beyond what the state minimum requirements are for density bonuses. We proposed a 50% density bonus that was utilized previously, and now the state has adopted that as a model for other jurisdictions to follow. We have also come up with something that is considered unlimited density in certain circumstances, more the downtown model where it's more the built format, or you're looking at an FAR based or a size based, how many units you can put within that to go to an unlimited category. But we are tasked at the city to have regulations that implement both state law and local law for development that covers certain areas. And these could be affordable by income levels, for the senior housing sector, foster youth, disabled veterans, and the homeless categories. So go through some of these. I'll go through each one of those categories and the different options and regulations that we have set up for them. Then I'll also talk about the density bonus, how many units you can get in addition to the base density within a zone. The requirement to replace existing units. What if I already have existing tenants that are low income or affordable? Do they get displaced, and what is in place to protect them? Affordable housing can be both for rent or for sale. This is accommodated through coordination with the Housing Commission and the Housing Development Funds. And then what are the incentives and waivers allowed for developers to go through with? So when can we use affordable housing density bonus projects? This is when your base zone has at least 5 units allowed by right. So take your typical RM zone, a multifamily zone, certain lot size, 20,000 square feet allows for 10 units. You do qualify for a density bonus and affordable. You would have to max out that minimum 5 units and then get the density based on that. And for that, we have different categories: very low, low, and moderate income. So with the very low, and moderate income, these are both for sale and for rent. We have different categories. And based on what they're proposing, if it's for very low, low, or moderate income, we require a certain percentage of the units to be set aside for the development. Very low income is usually 30 to 50% of area median income. Low income is 30 to 60% of area median income. And those are calculated by the Housing Commission on an annual basis and provided to the public to understand what those are. Basically, they go by family size. For example, very low income, 50% of AMI for a family of 4 would be $57,000 in the city of San Diego. Low income, 60% of AMI for a family of 2 would be 55,000. So we use those income categories to identify what type of unit the developer is proposing. And based on the type of low income or very low, they get a certain number of incentives. So it might be better for them to provide the very low income, maybe 10% of their development at very low income, because they're going to get 5 incentives for development. That might be no parking, no height limit, reduced setbacks, increased FAR, those types of things. So the density for income levels is one thing. For a senior citizen housing development, we allow for a 20% density bonus. And these senior citizens can be either very low or low income. We use those same categories for what the Housing Commission sets for income levels. For the foster youth and disabled veterans, we found that there was a need for housing specifically for these populations. Once again, we allow for a 20% density bonus if you're providing for these populations. And for the homeless criteria, we have reduced the permitting process for homeless facilities. They could either be emergency homeless shelters or actually permanent homeless shelters. You might have noticed that the City Council just approved the purchase of 2 hotels to house homeless, and this would be to transition out of our current homeless population at the convention center, which we've been able to use as part of the pandemic, since there's no conventions going on, obviously, to shelter homeless individuals, but we will be transitioning them to a more permanent supportive housing type within these homeless centers. So replacement of existing units is a requirement. We do not offer the density bonus for projects that have existing low income or rent restricted housing through the Housing Commission. These are typically restricted for 55 years or greater. We have a very robust policy of tracking all of that information, and Housing Commission has been very good of updating their database of existing affordable housing projects within the city. There's probably over 100 that are actually managed by the Housing Commission, different apartment projects throughout the city that you would not even notice that are for low income or very low income. They're maintained very well. But for new projects that want to propose where there isn't the existing, they're just normal tenants, there is a policy where we would track the tenant roles within those developments to make sure that if anyone does qualify, they might have the first right of refusal if it's a for rent or for sale project in the future. And the rent restriction and the sale restriction, the income levels are different. The Housing Commission does set those. I won't get into the specifics on that, but I can provide that to you, Daniel, later, some Housing Commission data on what those are. Finally, the most important element of affordable housing are the incentives and waivers. Incentives are very important to provide for developers in order to do affordable housing. Now, what is an incentive? An incentive is basically a deviation to a development regulation. If I have a height limit of 40 foot within a zone, or I have an FAR of 1.0, or I have setbacks that are 20 feet from the front, 20 feet from the rear, 10 on the side, I might not be able to fit the project type within that box that we have. You are, as students of architecture know, you start with what can I build within that box? Well, we've kind of blown that box up and made it more form-based of this is how many units you are allowed to get a maximum of with this density bonus. So we're going to allow you incentives maybe to go beyond that height limit. Is it proportional? Are you doing just 10%? Well, maybe that's 2 more stories that we're going to allow for. Is it unlimited density or 50% density? Maybe we'll allow additional stories. We're going to allow the setbacks to be waived. We're not going to park these projects as they normally are, because that's going to take up more land area. Any development regulation within the Land Development Code, and as students of architecture or other disciplines, as you notice, there are many requirements for the built form environment that are applied to some of these projects. Open space, common open space, private open space, storage, all of these little things, design requirements, transparency, setbacks, stepbacks, architectural design, all of these qualify as a development regulation that can be incentivized to, we're going to waive this requirement in order for us to get affordable housing. It's been very important. We have not denied any incentives for development. We have actually been promoting the use of these incentives for these. They can go beyond development regulations. They can go for mixed-use zoning. Perhaps it's a mixed-use zone, a commercial zone that allows for residential but requires commercial on the ground floor. Well, perhaps, especially now, we're seeing more interest in perhaps converting some of that commercial ground space to residential. And so we will entertain a deviation to requiring commercial on the ground floor. We can look more at some of the East Coast or mixed-use models where we have more walk-ups, more townhome style developments, more the European model where we can include residential on the ground floor and make a more activated street environment. So we're looking at that. So those are what we consider. What we don't consider an incentive is actually a waiver of a required permit, something that's fee related or a dedication. Some of these projects do require a dedication of additional land, perhaps for a road widening, for a bike lane, or for additional pedestrian access, maybe new sidewalk improvements. Those types of things are not considered incentives that we can use. We work with applicants to provide justification for those incentives, that it wouldn't have an adverse impact against public health and safety. So setbacks, height, those types of things are not an adverse impact to public health and safety, but some of the transportation, traffic, and engineering items might be, such as developing within a visibility area. If there's any pedestrian vehicular conflicts, then we're going to look at those items and try to work with applicants to address those. The coastal zone is a little different. We have to look at consistency with the local coastal program. So if there is guidelines in there about public access, view corridors, protection of environmentally sensitive lands, maybe it's within a beach or bluff or sensitive biological resources, wetlands, we will pay particular attention to that, not provide for an incentive. So on the incentives, as I said before, depending on the type of project someone proposes, if it's very low income, your density bonus could go up. If I'm going to provide 10% of my income, I have 50 units, 10% would be 5. I'm going to do 5 units. I get a 32% density bonus, and I'm going to get 2 incentives. So based on the percentage of low income, your density bonus will go up and the number of incentives will go up to a total of 5 incentives. So we kind of work with applicants if they come in and they figure, okay, I'm only going to do 10%, I get a 32% density bonus, I only get 2 incentives, but they find out that actually I need an additional incentive, then they're going to provide that additional unit to get that additional incentive for whatever development regulation they have to address. So it might translate into that project becoming not a low-income project, but a very low-income project, which applicants are working with us and the Housing Commission to provide. So those will base, and I'll show all this information on the detailed specifics, Daniel. It might be important for perhaps some of your studio work or other departments or divisions to maybe take a piece of property and say, okay, how many units can we get here based on very low or moderate or low income? And what types of incentives do we need to have? And through that exercise, you might find certain properties that, you just can't fit that many units based on this site. It might be, and you have to pay particular attention to the unit type. Are they all going to be 1 bedrooms? Are they going to be a mix of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms? If that's the case, it's also important to know that we have to provide the affordable housing across all income levels. We can't just say all of the very low are going to be the 1 bedrooms or studios. We have to provide an equal amount of studio 1 and 2s throughout that development. And we have to work with the Housing Commission to make sure that that happens. So it'd be interesting to, perhaps take a couple sites within the city and find out what can work and what can't work, and working with some of your groups. We also offer incentive for actual childcare on site and for commercial development. This is something new and interesting. We have not gotten one in yet, but as I think more and more people are going to be working from home in the future, some of these mixed-use developments might find it important to provide childcare on site. and some other services on site that will allow people to work from home and not worry about that childcare being somewhere out of the way, but in close proximity to their house. The waivers, we have not gotten any requests for waivers yet. Those are different incentives in that it's reducing a development standard that actually physically precludes you from doing that development. It would be difficult to quantify what these are, but I will let you know when we see it. A waiver shouldn't require a rezone or a general plan amendment or any other type of discretionary permit. Parking for affordable housing, we've reduced that considerably. We've gone to a format of zero parking in many cases within parking standards transit priority areas. These are within close proximity to trolley stations, transit stations, bus stations, those types of things. We've noticed that parking has been one of the main restrictions and impediments to providing housing in general, not just affordable housing, because of the parking rates. So we have gone above and beyond what the state has said, and we've reduced the number of spaces down to almost half a space per bedroom. But as I've said, in some cases, we've gone to a zero parking model. I can stop there on affordable if there's any questions, or we can move on to inclusionary. This will be very brief as well. It's up to you, Daniel.
There is one question, and maybe we mix the format and address the questions with
okay.
Housing. There's one specific question by one of our faculty members, Juliana Maxim. She wonders who within cities or in Sacramento measures, and I'm quoting, the cost, the social and environmental cost versus the returns of some of these waivers and incentives. She speaks a little bit at length about a project she's following in Encinitas that apparently promised certain density bonus, and the final return appears to be less than 30% of what was projected in terms of affordable units. So I wonder, Gary, if you could speak just a little bit about how do we measure whether these, or how does the city measure incentives and bonuses on, I guess what I'm reading is completed projects.
Okay, well, within the city of San Diego, we track each affordable housing project. We specifically tag them because we do have to report out both to the city of San Diego, our elected officials, the Housing Commission, and the state on the amount of affordable housing that we're provided. Each jurisdiction has been allotted a certain percentage that they are to provide. I know there's been problems in some of the coastal communities like Encinitas and Carlsbad on their fair share. City of San Diego has been very progressive in identifying how many units we can accommodate within the city through these different programs. We've kind of done an analysis of all the density bonus units, affordable units, inclusionary, accessory dwelling units. Where are the opportunities for these? We tag these projects. We monitor the incentives that are requested. The applicant has to actually enter into an agreement with the Housing Commission on the type of affordability and the number of affordability. And so it's an excellent question, because sometimes we might see that they have agreed to perhaps, moderate income, 50% AMI, they get two incentives. When they go to their actual building permits, they might modify the project to do less. And we've said you've entered into an agreement with the Housing Commission. You might have to go back and modify that agreement. Now, whether the Housing Commission says, okay, you can pay an in lieu fee to make up that difference, or maybe they end up selling that project to another developer that's 100% affordable and they want to modify that, then they do. So we specifically track that, and we've worked well with the Housing Commission to coordinate that. And we're required by the state to track this. And I know our local officials are demanding this information on an annual basis to see, okay, we've adopted this. Are we implementing it correctly? In what areas of the city is it happening? What more can we do? In the past, we've just taken these rules from the state and said, okay, we're going to adopt them. But we've gone above and beyond and said, we have to modify these and tweak those to our own conditions here in the city to see where they're working. And if we see something's not working, then we're going to tweak it and we're going to change it. And we noticed, the 35% density bonus, that was the top you could do. We could say, well, let's offer 50%, and people started doing 50%. Let's go to unlimited density. Let's see if there's an appetite for that. And there is. So there's different models to do. We had a lot of interest from churches that said, we have a lot of empty vacant parking lots here that we could provide affordable housing or just regular housing. We looked at the impediments to that. We adopted regulations to reduce the parking requirements, allow for affordable housing on these church sites within multifamily zones. The state looked at what we were doing and said, hey, we're going to adopt this regulation as well. This is something good. So it's important to not only implement, but to monitor, to track. So excellent point, and we are doing that. I can't speak to other jurisdictions within the city, but I know the state does monitor and track, and the state HCD has worked well with us because we know this is important. And if we don't track it, we don't have we can't measure how important this program has been. You know, which one is used the best. We have a micro density, 100% density bonus. We can't deviate from height or setbacks, but we're getting 100%. We're getting smaller units, you know, an average size of 600, but not greater than 800. We're seeing this in La Jolla. We would have never seen this in La Jolla 5-10 years ago. We're seeing more and more of these without implications from local community groups because it has been passed by the state. We're implementing it here, and we're being progressive, and we're trying to attack the housing crisis. So excellent point. Yes, we are tracking it, and we will continue to track it. And I think this is important to share with the educational institutions such as USD. Perhaps do your own analysis of this. We don't. Some of our staff here at DSD, we can provide the information. We don't have as much time to actually, you know, look at trends. We want to get a dashboard on board. So here's where affordable housing is occurring, but maybe you do the deeper dive and say, why is it happening? For what reason? Is the land value less there? Is the affordable housing more acceptable or appropriate in that location? That type of thing. So looking forward to that next part of the affordable housing regulations going forward. So inclusionary, this has come up because we want to encourage, you know, diverse and balanced neighborhoods. We were finding affordable housing was only going into certain jurisdictions and areas, but we wanted to provide for inclusionary across all income levels to ensure that it's in throughout the city. This is for the larger development type projects. These are for projects of 10 or more dwelling units, and this is in compliance with state and local law. Ours goes, I think, above and beyond state law. But what we do here is require all development to have at least 10% of the total dwelling units for a project of 10% or more to provide that on site as an inclusionary housing project. So this might not be an affordable housing project. We have those developers that are taking advantage of getting additional density by using the bonus. These are those projects that don't have affordable housing within them. They're required now by law to provide it on site. And that is for projects that are 10 or greater. If there's 100 units, 10% of those units will be inclusionary housing. Those will be set aside either for rent or for sale. And it's going to be that 30 to 60% area median income level. Like I said, I'll provide those numbers to you, Daniel, offline that you can share with your staff. So you can, it's kind of a good exercise to see, okay, 10%, what are the numbers, and do the math and see how does it pencil out? Does it really work? So it's 10% for sale, 15% for sale. It's just going to depend on those different levels. We require an agreement with the Housing Commission. There is an option to pay an in lieu fee, and we, you know, prior to 2020, a lot of people were using the in lieu fee option. They would just pay into the fund, and it would be covered that way. They wouldn't have to provide it on site. This last city council and going forward decided that we want to make this inclusionary housing rule more appropriate for people, actually incentivize it to be provided on site. This took a lot of outreach with a lot of different industry groups, builders, developers, nonprofits, Housing Commission, elected leaders, to come up with what is the new regulations for inclusionary housing. So there is an in lieu fee that is calculated by the Housing Commission. There's a certain percentage that could be paid, and it's based on a square footage amount. Once again, I'll provide those specific numbers, and you can use that for perhaps a class project to just see how the numbers work. But there is an in lieu fee option, but it's at a level that would probably mean, why don't we just provide the unit at this point? Because it's, you know, and $11, $12 a square foot over a 100 unit project, that could add up, you know, $500 million on some of these larger subdivision projects of 100, 200, 300 units. So it kind of brings the in lieu more in line with why not just provide it on site and get that goodwill for that. There's other exemptions allowed. I think the rate is about $12 per square foot, and it graduates every year, every summer to a different number. The other option is for a land donation. Perhaps they don't have enough room on site to provide it, and we're seeing a lot of for-profit private developers working with affordable housing developers to say, I have a site over here, and I can take 100% affordable on my site. You are only going to do 10 units on your site. We're going to do 100 on our site. So we'll take that 10 with this land donation. And we've seen a few of those projects go forward, and it's been interesting to see the private sector work with the public sector on providing more opportunities for affordable since this inclusionary housing has come online. Accessory dwelling units. This is my favorite topic. I've kind of been the lead and the point of contact within the city. And the San Diego has been recognized by the state, the UC Berkeley Turner Center, that does a lot of housing innovation. The state Housing and Community Development Department has recognized the city of San Diego, and a lot of jurisdictions are contacting me on a weekly basis to see what we're doing and how we've done it to promote accessory dwelling units. These have always been on the books within the city of San Diego. They've been considered granny flats or companion units. I've done research going back 1940s and 50s. We have you know, a conversion of a garage or an accessory structure, or and it's called out as a granny flat permit, full kitchen, bath, living facility for my parent to live here. We started to include within our land development code, our zoning code in the 90s, actually specific regulations on companion units. They were restrictive. There were design considerations. These were allowed in single family residential neighborhoods. And we've seen a complete transition to allowing more homes built in these areas. But single family neighborhoods were traditionally protected. It was single family neighborhoods only, one house, no rentals. If you were going to do a companion unit, it was going to be a certain size. It was only going to be 700 square feet. It was going to be visible from the street. The entrance would be separate. It would have to comply with setbacks. It couldn't be over a certain height. It couldn't be a second story. All of these design considerations. And it was going to be a conditional use permit. It was going to be discretionary on top of that. So it was going to be a $10,000, $12,000, 6-month, maybe year-long process if you're in the coastal zone because your neighbors are complaining, and community group was complaining about increased density. In the 2000s, we kind of loosened these restrictions. We weren't seeing many. We saw maybe 10 a year. Early 2000s, we said, what are we doing? We need to modify this. We kind of got out ahead of the state, reduced some of those design requirements, got more, still weren't getting more. And then we saw that the tide was shifting. Some of the elected officials were noticing that we have a housing shortage. What's a way to have naturally affordable housing? Smaller units in some of the single family neighborhoods that already had the infrastructure in place. They could tap into the water and sewer, et cetera. So in 2017, the state finally said to local jurisdictions, look, you're going to have to adopt our rules going forward and allow for these by right in single family zones. We saw this was coming down. In 2016, we tried to get ahead of the curve, reduced our regulations, reduced our restrictions, and provided for additional opportunities, not only in single family zones, but in multifamily zones. And now in 2020, we have another slate of regulations that have come down from the state. The city of San Diego, fortunately, has already had a lot of these on the books. They've looked to what we've been doing and said, hey, why don't we adopt that at the state level? So I'm going to go over these real briefly, but it's fascinating to see that we've gone from 10 applications to a year to over 1,200 in the past 3 years, 2.5 years really. And we're seeing hundreds of these being built and proposed throughout the city in different areas. So they are allowed now in all RS zones, all the single dwelling unit development zones. So you can have now a junior accessory dwelling unit and a companion unit for a total of 3 units on a single family property. that's 2 additional units in a zone that previously only allowed 1. This has helped us address our housing shortage at the state to say these are the areas where we can accommodate additional density. A junior accessory dwelling unit is a maximum 500 square feet. It used to be only within the existing habitable area of a house. It was typically an existing bedroom or maybe a family room. We've expanded it to be within an existing or detached or proposed garage or accessory structure. A junior accessory dwelling unit requires the homeowner to live in either the main unit or the junior accessory dwelling unit. It has facilities for complete independent living if they want to. It can share a bath with the main facility, which reduces on the cost, but it does have kitchen facilities within that unit. These are ideal for your aging parent or maybe your son or daughter to move back in with you. You want to have that closer connection to them within your house. So in addition, we allow the detached companion unit on the single family property. These can be a maximum 1,200 square feet now. I've seen up to 3-4 bedrooms in some areas in the college area accommodate this. They have full kitchen and bath facilities. They can be attached or detached. They can encroach into side and rear yards. So on those smaller lots, it's important you can convert a garage now that maybe was built in the 50s at the property lines. It still has to comply with building code requirements for fire and life safety issues, no openings or windows, that sort of thing. It can be a second story. We don't have height limits now. It's the height limit of the zone. So that additionally helps for some of these smaller lots where there might be constraints to place these. We are no longer requiring parking for companion units. We used to have a slew of exemptions. I propose, let's make this simple. Citywide, everyone equitable, no parking required. The city council just adopted that yesterday, no parking required. That would eat up a lot of space on a lot. It would be very restrictive on the garage conversions. The state basically said no replacement parking is required if you're doing a garage conversion. We've gone one step further and said you don't have to provide parking at all for companions. This is something we want to promote. This is one impediment that we saw is going to help a lot of neighborhoods provide that. They can still provide the parking if they want, which is perfectly acceptable. And some of these, they want the rental income and it's better to have a parking space. So that's the huge change in the single family zones. The multifamily zones, another huge change has been that we are now promoting accessory dwelling units within multifamily zones. Prior to 2020, we had only allowed them in the case on a multiple family zoned lot where the maximum dwelling unit was 2. So an RM11 lot of 7,000 square feet yielded 2 units. You could do those 2 units and an additional companion unit for a total of 3. We were getting a lot of applications in the multifamily zoned areas, but we had multifamily zone properties that perhaps had a minimum density of 5. And the requirement was, well, we want you to max out that density first before you can get that additional companion unit. We've eliminated that requirement. If you can have 10 units on that property, we will allow you to just add that companion unit. You don't have to max out your regular density. We'll allow you to build a companion unit. So we're allowing up to 2 detached companion units on multifamily properties. In addition, we are now allowing, because we saw a lot of older existing triplexes or multifamily structures had perhaps habitable area that they could be converted. So we're allowing an unlimited conversion of that existing multifamily structure to companion units. So it might reduce the cost of just converting an existing multifamily structure and allowing companion units. We are looking at non-habitable space that you might be able to convert. Perhaps there's garages, storage areas, basement areas. There's a lot of basement areas, laundry rooms, things that could be more efficient when a designer looks at a building and says, here's all this unused space. Why don't we promote more companion units? So we're allowing at least 1 up to 25% of that to be converted. This, we will see more companion units, more smaller, naturally affordable units within some of the built environment. So this is incentivizing some developers not to tear down their 5-unit or their triplex in that neighborhood. It's allowing for additional development within the structure or detached from the structure. Same thing there, maximum 1,200 square feet if they're detached. We do not require agreements for properties if they're not a junior accessory dwelling unit. This was prohibitive in the past because the homeowner had to be on site and live in one of the units. Obviously, some of them they are, In some cases, they're building the companion unit. It's a newer structure. They're moving into the companion unit and renting out their main structure. The companion might be smaller for whatever reason, and they might get more rental income off that main house. So we're seeing a lot of activity depending on the neighborhood. A lot of people are living in these. Some are just renting them out, and it's providing for housing. We did see the implication for these to be short-term rentals. Council did adopt a requirement that these are a minimum 31-day rental. So these are not for short-term rentals. These are for housing supply. We want these to be for naturally affordable units throughout the city. And we coordinate with our Treasury Department on who is applying for a short-term rental occupancy permit, coordinating with our code enforcement division to make sure that these are being rented for affordable units. Another new proposal that we incorporated this year was bonus accessory dwelling units. And the state read our organizations and said, really? Wow. And so this is one thing that a lot of other jurisdictions are looking to me, Encinitas, the county, other jurisdictions throughout the city are saying, how are you going to do this? So we kind of modeled it after our affordable housing regulations and allowed for bonus density. We allow you an additional companion unit for every unit that you're providing for affordable. So we will coordinate with the Housing Commission, and if you're providing for sale or for rent, we will provide additional unlimited density bonus for accessory dwelling units. So on larger sites, this might yield 5-10 units. On small lot subdivisions where you can get 20 units, we can add another 20 units on each one of these small subdivisions. And this is one other part of state law where originally you could not sell these. We will allow for sale companion units in the case where it's affordable. Perhaps it's a nonprofit, Habitat for Humanity, and there's some type of housing organization that will be able to sell this off. So this is something new, and we're going to hopefully educate the public on this option and see if it will happen going forward, because it'll be, a smaller lot size, a smaller unit. It'll be at that naturally, lower level rather than median 550, 600,000 square dollar amount that's currently going for the average house price. Maybe we can get it down to lower. And we've seen a lot of interest in that. We've seen a lot of interest also from some of the manufactured home community, prefab home community, storage containers. These are these naturally affordable units that have already been pre-designed. They're easier to build and to place onto these sites. So we're working with those groups to kind of go through our building permit process in an expedited manner. We're working with the Housing Commission. They've identified all their sites within the city that they could actually provide for accessory dwelling units as an affordable housing option. And some of these will be the manufactured housing option. And then finally, tiny homes has finally made it into our code. We were one of the first jurisdictions to actually adopt it. LA, Santa Cruz, some of the other ones within the state have. We're the first within the county of San Diego to actually adopt regulations for tiny homes. These are homes on wheels. They're accessory in nature. They fall under a different category, but these are on wheels. They're regulated also by the state of California DMV. They're of a certain size. There's a max size. I believe it's 400 square feet. It could be one story, but it's a fully contained living unit. It has your kitchen, bath facilities. There will be hookups to water and sewer for that infrastructure. Some design requirements that we had to address so that people weren't just putting a motorhome or an RV onto their site. It's a certain size to provide for it. But we've gotten a lot of interest from the tiny home community. We've done a lot of outreach with them and coordinated with them. These regulations were just adopted last week. They're in effect. We've created an information bulletin to provide to the industry and homeowners that are interested in the tiny home option. And the beauty of this is you can move off the site and go to another site in the future if necessary. So all of these fall under the ADU category, and we've seen a lot of interest in this. Like I said, over 1,200 applications within the past 3 years, which is just phenomenal. They're getting built, they're getting inspected, they're getting occupied, and it's been really good to be a part of this movement at the state level to get the recognition that we have. So it'll be important for for you as professionals to look at the trends. Where are these going into? What communities are going into? What size are they? Are people taking affordable housing option? That sort of thing. And are the neighborhoods getting the change? Are they getting accustomed to the change? We thought some neighborhoods were going to be against it because of the parking requirements and that sort of thing. Have not seen much pushback from it. We're seeing them in all communities. But it would be interesting as we publish this data for you on the educational side to look to see where actually are they occurring more. I've done a lot of outreach south of 8 because I know that's some of the underserved populations. What were the restrictions there? What were the impediments? We found one, it was the fee structure. We had to eliminate the fees to make sure that these went forward. The most cost prohibitive were the development impact fees. Since these were smaller units in more established neighborhoods, the infrastructure was already there, so we eliminated the development impact fee. Development impact fees based on the community plan type you were in could range up to $20,000 per unit. So think of it, if you wanted to provide a companion unit in San Ysidro, but the development impact fee was $25,000, the regional transportation Sandag fee was $5,000, your school fee is $4,000. All these fees add up, your water and sewer connection fee is more. It didn't pencil out, and people are going through the process going, I can't afford it, I didn't get this. So we're doing more outreach ahead of time. We've eliminated the fee structure to get down to just the cost recoverable aspect. What does it cost staff to review, the inspectors to go out and inspect, and that's ranges anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 depending on the size and location, which has been very helpful. We didn't realize that at first, but we did implement that in 2017 and 18, some of those fee structures. And the state looked to us and saw, okay, yeah, development impact fees are a problem. So by eliminating those fees, we saw more, and some of the new state law identifies water sewer capacity hookup fees as well. So we're going to see more and more of these in certain communities. And I'm glad you're a part of this conversation and this discussion, and I'd love to hear from you, your feedback, and anything that I can do to help you going forward. Finally, we do have an expedited process for all these types of projects, the affordable, inclusionary, and accessory dwelling units. We've codified these so it's implemented at the staff level. We can point to the decision makers and the Housing Commission and the state. And like that question was previously, how do you track this? We can track how many projects went through, under what time frame did they go through, but that has been key. It's one thing to have the regulations in effect, but to have a process to implement these and to expedite these, because as your previous speakers have probably talked about, time is money, and the process does add money to it. The cost of carrying that land, lining up your contractors and designers and getting that final permit issued up to final inspection and your certificate of occupancy. There's that time that you have to carry the cost of the land and all those other factors, and we want to make sure that the process, there's some more certainty to the process, when this can be issued and eventually occupied. So with that, I think I've covered a lot in a short period of time, but I will provide more detail to you, Daniel, and I'd look to have maybe some models, some examples of some project specifics, and we can go through with various departments at the USD to see how do these pencil out, and what are those societal costs and things like that.
Right, and run scenarios. I think it's such an interesting, not only just to interpret sites, but run scenarios, right, of different parts of the mix. So I'm just gonna open up the Q&A. We do have one more question, but I encourage the participants to place their questions there. We have John Bilsell, who's also another faculty in our department, who raises the question about nonprofit sectors running affordable housing projects. You mentioned that the Housing Commission runs a number of them, and we could be hundreds. And he speculates, and he wanted to ask you, thanking you for coming, by the way, and ask you, and I quote, would it not work if we encourage the nonprofit sector 100% affordable housing? So 100% affordable housing projects run only by the public sector. Would that not incentivize? Or, I mean, maybe I guess the nuance here is, what's the difference between management by the nonprofit or for profit, right? And would it not incentivize to have more nonprofit and 100% affordable housing projects? Does that make sense? Maybe I was.
It makes sense. That was the traditional model. It was
Okay.
affordable housing developers, nonprofit sector is going to do all the heavy lifting.
Right.
We've tried to incentivize to include the private sector and the private developers. You can do this too. We're going to give you additional density. We're going to give you 50%. We're going to give you unlimited density. Join us at the table. Help us work together so that those nonprofits aren't shouldering all of the burden. But there might be the Housing Commission, you know, the money that has gone through the in lieu fee process to them. Yes, they're taking a heavy burden of it. Maybe more nonprofits start joining with them, and the Housing Commission doesn't shoulder all of that burden and include more of them. Kind of as an aside, in some of my roundtables and discussions with the affordable housing community is, how do you finance these projects? Even things as simple as an accessory dwelling unit. Is there financing available for these? And I don't think that discussion has been fully vetted. We need to involve the banking community, the financial sector. I've reached out to the county assessor, like, people need to know, is their property going to get completely reassessed? Is it just on that value of that new construction? There's some unknowns there. And if we focus our attention to everyone, to work together, then maybe we get more bang for our buck. So yeah. The financing has been an issue, and I hope perhaps, you know, at USC you can reach out to your real estate center and see what are the options for some of these financing mechanisms. There's a lot of the traditional, you know, state grants, and I see the flurry of activity and applications coming to us saying, hey, we got this grant deadline, we're getting this funding source available. Can you look at our, you know, proposal, our density? Does it pencil out? You know, does it meet your zoning requirements? No discretionary permits. Get it right back to us. It's kind of this haphazard state lottery system that's going on. If there's better coordination with the nonprofits of, here's the expectations, here's the timelines, let's work together, then let's do it.
Yeah. No, and as you mentioned, and we've been in panels where it is hard to assess the value. Still, conventional banking doesn't recognize, or at times recognizes and doesn't recognize, you know, for instance, in the ADU, you know, sector. And
that typology, they don't really know how to, okay, we guarantee a certain cash flow. This is going to be a rental income over a certain, we don't know. And because they're spread out over different neighborhoods and different types, it's kind of low.
No, absolutely. So I'm waiting for more questions. I'm gonna incentivize the participants to kind of join us. I'm curious, just selfishly, in this possibility of selling an ADU, how would that work in terms of the land? I mean, is it a co-op? I mean, how would one process that? That's so exciting. I mean, I'm really excited about that. That's brand new. How does that work?
Right. So previously it was specific, no sale, no conveyance of separately. It was for rental purposes only. We will have to work with the Housing Commission to come up with a suitable agreement. It'll be probably for 55 years for a certain income level, and make sure there's certain guarantees in place that it's not sublet. The other issue is, if the person that's renting that out, what happens when their income starts to increase? Do they get to a point where they can't stay there any longer because they've gone over that threshold of their median income? We want to raise people up, but we might raise them up so much that they have this lower rent, but they're doing well in their career, and now they're at the point where you can't kick me out of this. We had an agreement. So those are things that we're gonna have to work with on the Housing Commission, and I'd be open to your suggestions and ideas on what does that look like in terms of an agreement with the Housing Commission and the homeowner, and is it different for the Housing Commission property versus Habitat for Humanity or some other type of nonprofit? We didn't really define what a nonprofit is. There's some community land bank grant institutions. I see this opening up. We just proposed it. It's just been adopted. So we're going to have to implement it somehow, and we're open to suggestions.
So exciting, actually, so exciting. Very good. So I'm looking at the Q&A, but I'm also looking at the time. And unless somebody has any final thoughts. I know that there's been some resources posted up. Thank you, Diego, for posting up some resources on our chat as Gary's speaking. Well, I mean, thank you so much, Gary. Every time, the situation on the ground is constantly changing, and we are, excited to follow up. And yeah, thank you for joining us today. And I will collect the resources that you mentioned and distribute them to everybody. By the way, this talk is also recorded, so it will be made available so that everybody could have access to the slides and all of that.
Excellent, thank you. And as always, you can reach out to me, the faculty, your student body, if they have questions about, regulations, certain projects or interest.
We have
encourage that dialogue with USD.
Our department has entered on the Real Estate Challenge with our real estate colleagues, and I'm hoping that this year, when it returns, that it is focused on housing, because it's often open, right? So then the mixed use then drifts onto other.
Right.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Gary. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me in the invitation.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great day.
Ciao, everybody. Thank you.